Hi, this is Michael Smook for YouTube Commentaries. Today is December 28th. It's a Wednesday. We're in the year 2016. The end of the year is rapidly approaching. So Happy New Year to everyone who's listening in. Today the conversation is entitled, You Never Know. So today what we're going to be doing is an introduction explaining what I mean by the title, and then we'll be proceeding with 3 brief chapters on friends, family, and work. And then we'll be concluding with how you turn a negative into a positive. And before we proceed further, let's start with a pre-introduction. I've mentioned this before in previous YouTube talks, but it's worth mentioning again. The reason why I decide to do a commentary stems from the fact that I pick a subject matter that contains relevant information, lessons learned, and has a bit of humor. And when you wrap it up all together, what I hope to convey to my listeners is something that's meaningful and resonates inside. I know it does with me, and I hope for the same for my viewers. With that said, let's talk about the title, You Never Know. The title is called You Never Know because you never know how important you're going to be to friends, to family, to people at work. And with that said, let's go through these 3 chapters and then we'll work on the conclusion. You never know how important you're going to be to friends. Before I get into the gist of this chapter, let me give you 2 words. They're Hebrew words, but they relate to a concept. One is called a mitzvah, which is a good deed. Another one is called tzedakah, which is, some people think it means charity. It also means a debt or an obligation, such as one of the higher forms of tzedakah is helping someone with their career, a profession, or a job, so they can put for their families and themselves a roof over their heads, food in their backs, food in their stomach, and clothes on their backs. So that's tzedakah. So the story is it comes in the following way. About 10 years ago, a coworker who was rather new to working in municipal government comes to me and says, well, I'm having a bad time at work. And we had something in common. She was a staff analyst, new in municipal government, and she hadn't taken a civil service exam. So she was provisional. I was the old pro. I had passed 2 or 3 civil service exams. I was permanent. I was a line manager. We reported to the same people, but I was blocks away and had a lot of freedom. Whereas her boss, who was mine, worked in the same office as she did, and she was been giving a hard time. And we'd get together for lunch, and I'd get a blow-by-blow as to what was going on. So at a certain point, this young lady was terminated. And I knew she was very intelligent because we had conversations over lunch, and I knew she came from a graduate school, a well-known graduate school that taught public policy. So I was in a position to help a friend. And in this way, I said, look, you didn't get fired or terminated based on your work. You were terminated because we're having budget problems. And such and such wasn't your boss. I was your boss. And you did this, this, and this for me. And so you can leave me as your reference. And she agreed to do that. So what happened was I received several phone calls from federal agencies. This young lady wanted to start a new life in Washington, D.C. and a new career. And I was able to give outstanding references. And I also received through email or through the U.S. mail hard copy documents to reinforce those verbal okays over the phone. I was able to check off boxes and give this young lady an outstanding evaluation. And she was able to get a job with the federal government as a policy and budget analyst, and she's done quite well. I was speaking to her about a year and a half ago, and over 8 or 9 years, she's been promoted 2 or 3 times. So she's doing quite well on her own. So maybe I helped a little bit, or maybe I helped a lot. That's one way of looking at it, or perhaps. But the thing about it is, you never know. You never know how you're going to be important to people and how you're going to be able to make a difference in people's lives. So there's an expression, the parlance they use today, kids use, it's called paying it forward. So I find whenever I have an opportunity to help out someone from a younger generation, be it somebody I know from work, my own son, the kid from around the block, as somebody who needs a job or wants to go to graduate school or go for medical school. And if they've happened to work for me, it's great that I'm able to help somebody. So believe me, I get as much pleasure as helping people as they might receive on their own initiative. So now that I've covered you never know how you can help friends, let's talk about you never know as it relates to family. Someone else at work, also an intern, a young lady, she said, how do you find a partner for life, a mate for life, and how do you determine who you should marry? And I said, well, when I was in my late 20s, I reached a determination that I thought that I'd best be able to find a mate for life and my partner by finding somebody who had the same level of religious observance as I did, and culturally we were in sync with each other. And then I briefly discussed the story of meeting my wife, where we met, and engagement, marriage, and honeymoon, and our early life together. And it took a while, but we had a child, and what it was like. But one of the things that I said, I told her something that they don't tell you in romance novels or in movies. I said, when you look at life, we live in a rather unforgiving world. And in going through life, or in choosing a partner for life, it's a lot like being a soldier in combat. So the question is, if you're in a foxhole, who do you want covering your back? So, and as I pointed out, in the course of a marriage, you're going to have some big credit card bills you have to pay off. You're going to have ongoing problems parenting. And you're going to have, one of you is going to get into an auto accident or maybe total the car. One of you is going to lose a job. So the question is, can you not only appreciate the strengths of your partner, but can you also be supportive of their weaknesses and be their friend and be of help to them when you're working through situations? So it was a pleasure sharing that story with a coworker at work, and I'm happy to say that we're approaching 30 years of marriage, and we've made the right decision. So now I've discussed about you never know, about family in particular, choosing a partner and for life. Let's talk about you never know about work. You never know how important you're going to be at work. Let me tell you a story. I was a contract manager. This goes back to the early part of the previous decade. And, well, let me just add that in the course of the story, my last name, Smook, became a verb in the sense that I was managing the contract of a computer data processing vendor for a government agency I worked for. And they were doing a fair to good job, but I had to be really tough on them to get them up to speed and it seemed like early Monday morning or late Friday afternoon, I'd write emails. They could be one-page detailed. They could be as many as 2, 3, or 4 pages. And I would send these emails out, and around this computer company, when they received one of my rather tough emails, fair but tough, the word around the water cooler was that you've been smooped. So when I heard that privately, I had to chuckle. But in reality, I told them, I said, look, it's better that I'm tough with you. It's between you and me. And every month, sometimes it takes I have to delay it a month or two, but I'll sign the invoices and you'll get paid. And I'll do my best to give you a satisfactory review for the year. So you're in a good position. When the contract is up for bid, you can bid and you may have a chance to renew the contract and have a new contract. So the story about the contract goes as following. We're in the process of conducting a nationwide search to find a data processing vendor to do clinical reporting, fiscal reporting, and third-party insurance billing, Medicare or Medicaid billing. This is before we put computers in the clinics. And so in the middle of this process, we're interviewing face-to-face the computer vendor, the bidders, the incumbent and other contenders who wanted this contract. And it was an unusual day. In the middle of our busy day with interviews, my committee, I had 5 committee members from different programs I selected to be on my committee, and I were interviewing people. And in the middle of all those interviews, we're interviewing the computer company that had the contract already. And they were hoping to be awarded a new contract. And the number 2 person with the computer company, he didn't look right. He was all red in the face. I didn't like his body posture. I didn't like the way he was speaking. He was speaking to me. He was sniffling. He said he had a cold, but I thought he might be crying. In a nutshell, I thought the man might be having a nervous breakdown. And here I'm in the middle of interviews, very important interviews, and I had to be, everything has to be above board. I have what we say fiduciary responsibility. There's public money involved, and it has to be considered to be objective. So I'm thinking, well, how can I help this person in a small way, because this guy looked terrible. So there was one committee member of mine sitting to the right of me. He's asking the same questions over and over again, and he's recalibrating his questions slightly, but it's the same question over and over again. And I knew this fellow, the number 2 person with the computer company, who seems to be suffering during this interview, is suffering. So I leaned over to my committee, fellow committee mate, and I leaned over, I whispered in his ear, and I said, shorten up your questions and move on. And he listened to me. He asked 2 or 3 more questions. The rest of the committee asked 2 or 3 more questions. And within 10, 15 minutes, it was over. So the thing about it is, and the fellow who was suffering through that interview and the rest of his coworkers left. And now it's suddenly a year later. And the committee decided, we unanimously agreed to offer a new contract to that same computer company. And I did the heavy lifting. I wrote a final report, and I drafted a contract, and I went through various levels of approval. And then we were able to put money aside and start paying the computer vendor. So I went out for coffee and a bagel to the same guy. He's vice president of a computer company. And I mentioned that specific day to him. And I said, you look like you're having a nervous breakdown. He went on for half an hour, and he told me he had a number of problems bothering that day, and he was in a very bad place. And when I told him what I did and what I was able to do to ease his day, he said to me, he said, Michael, he said, that's about the nicest thing anybody's ever done for me. And, in a small way, I was able to lessen this man's pain. He was having a very, very bad day, and I was able to make the day a little bit easier. So you never know. You never know how important you're going to be to people. And I always had to be tough with this computer company, with the contract. And I had to be objective in chairing this committee. But the fact that I was able to give some empathy, provide some empathy in a very subtle, nuanced sort of way. The Jewish word we use is rachmanis, or empathy. And the fact that I was able to help out and make this person's day go a little easier. And a year after the fact, we were able to close the circle on that episode. It felt good that I was able to help him. I was glad I was able to help him in a small way. Okay, we've discussed now, you never know how you could be important to friends, with family, in particular my marriage, and to a contract that I'm managing at work. Now let's talk about turning a negative into a positive. Previously, in YouTube talks, I've discussed with you in spirituality and the psychology talk about getting my confidence back. I talked about my career, how I've had ups and downs throughout my career. And, the thing is, I reached a point in my career, I've studied 6 years of government in college. December 30th of this year, it'll be exactly 27.5 years with my agency. I'm very proud of that. And it'll be 10 years in my civil service grade. I'm very proud of that as well. But the thing about it is, in terms of my work, it's gone from more of a passion to a paycheck, and also a way to build up my pension and my other retirement account, a tax-deferred annuity. So the thing is that I figured out that by doing these YouTube talks and by doing Google Plus essays, the last year I've been quite busy. I come home every day, I work on new projects, and that's resulted in 6 essays and 10 YouTube talks. So I've had a lot of fun with it, and the other day I said to myself for the first time, sometimes people do you favors. So I think what happened is a lot of the work that I loved doing, I'd come in early, I'd work through lunch, I'd stay extra hours, I'd work on the weekends, and that work, through no fault of my own, was taken away from me. And between doing my internet projects, my essays, my YouTube talks, it's been a real joy for me. So I'm hoping to go on to other endeavors, perhaps some public speaking as well. So the fact is, you never know how, even with a negative, you could turn it into a positive. And in some way, by taking things away from you, people have done you favors. So, we're about to wrap it up because it's almost New Year's. First, I want to wish all of my viewers a happy 2017. Today is a Wednesday. It's December 28th. This is Michael Smook for YouTube Commentaries. I'm speaking to you from my home in Forest Hills, New York. Until next time, goodbye and good luck.